Good morning and welcome to the Executive Committee portion of the Richmond Regional Transportation and Planning Organization's monthly meeting day on October 6th. Ms. Firestone, if you would take the roll call and then we'll dive into discussion.
Thank you. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart. Charles City County, Mr. Atkins.
Here.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Holland. Goochland County, Chair Lumpkins.
Here.
Ms. Lascalette.
Here.
Hanover County, Vice Chair Peterson. Mr. Davis. Henrico County, Ms. O'Bannon. Here. Mr. Thornton. New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Here.
Mr. Tiller. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Here.
Ms. Carmack. City of Richmond, Dr. Newbill. Mr. Addison. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. I see that folks on.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Carmack is on the executive committee.
She's an alternate.
Please make note of that, and other than that, we think we have, you called folks on the executive committee. Any other corrections on that?
She's listening to some alternate, but
No
she's
one's
going
on.
to call the roll for.
And I'm looking, the folks online are just like internal, so nobody on the executive committee is
Correct,
online.
no members.
Okay,
And I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
What you would like clarified, Mr. Williams, want clarified is if the person who is on a member of the executive committee is here, you don't have to call the alternate, name, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed you did that, but I try not to.
good, thank you all. Okay, does anybody wish to comment on the agenda or suggest any amendments, additions, corrections? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the July 7th.
So moved. Second.
All right. Thank you. Susan gets a second. Thank you. And any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sounded unanimous, so the minutes are approved. Mr. Parsons, you're already to your report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I honestly forgot the report. I wanted to get into the discussion of the executive committee.
Dive in, and I think that sounds good, because we're going to go, if folks will notice, item 5 after, that was item 3, item 4 is coming up, and then item 5, we will make sure, let's allow plenty of time. I told Mr. Parsons we'd allow plenty of time to do what I think, what my experience is normally done here is a review of the policy board agenda. So we're going to allow enough time for that, but I think since we're passing on the secretary's report, let's dive right in. And
Can I ask a question? The numbers are 1, 2, 3, 6.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We're 4 to 5. I don't have 4 and 5.
I'm not looking at the wrong thing. Mine are
Said
numbered
something
okay.
about-
I fixed
I
it.
think they
The initial one had, the numbering had gotten off, but it's corrected now on the printed version.
So there's a new version?
Let me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct.
All righty.
We caught the error, but not in time for the one you printed out, it sounds
So
like.
is it just renumbered or is it
Yes.
4 and 5? Okay, well, I'm sorry, well, that's all you need to tell me.
We're passing the secretary's report, and then the other business, and hopefully all of y'all saw the email that went out that talked about, mentioned that we're going to talk about the role of the executive committee. And I am.
Well, I didn't get the email, but I got the information.
That's what I was looking for. I didn't bring a printout, but what's on the screen in front of us.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't know if anybody wants a paper version. Do we have a paper version of that?
I can print some.
Does anybody, if anybody would like some paper, we can print some paper for what's on the screen. But that is the one page out of our bylaws that speaks to the executive committee. our bylaws say there shall be an executive committee, which is a standing committee of the MPO. And then speaks about a quorum, you don't want me to read it to you, but there's the things listed in the middle of the page spell out in the form of using the word shall have the following specific powers and duties. And when you read those, the one that I see in the list, look at B, any other power granted to it by an affirmative vote of the policy board. But then we have in the bylaws recommend amendments to the Unified Planning Work Program and Transportation Improvement TIP. Recommend additions and or revisions to the Highway Functional Classification System, approve socioeconomic data and forecasts, and recommend endorsements of requests from local governments, agencies, and other organizations seeking state and federal grants. My experience has been that most of that seems to happen at the policy board level pretty consistently. I don't know if folks with more of a historical knowledge of the organization can remember a time when the executive committee had more of a role or a different role than I've observed in my few years here. And I think this can go any direction this committee wants in terms of, we can recommend to the policy board an amendment in the bylaws if we want to go that far. Or maybe it's as simple as saying, with the duties that are listed, we can accomplish those meeting once a quarter versus every month. Please, this is more of a workshop discussion, so yes, Ms. Mann.
So this is the current wording, right?
This is the current bylaws, yes, ma'am.
In the past, I remember one occasion where the executive committee met, and I think it was because of the weather, that kind of thing. And the executive committee was given the power to make the decision, for a major thing. It's been years ago.
Okay.
And any other power granted to it by an affirmative vote of the MPO full board. Correct. And that happened, I don't remember when, it's been quite a few years, but they were voted to be allowed to do that because of sort of an emergency type situation. Okay. It wasn't an everyday thing. And they did vote, and I don't remember exactly how, they got the full board to vote. I think it was probably person by person, but it had to do with, it was the easiest way to try to get this done. It had to be done very quickly. Gotcha. I don't even remember what it was, but there was one. So
it worked out that the policy board had the time, emergency situation, but they had the time to delegate something to the executive.
That was important. I think, I'm remembering correctly, it was in 2003. I know you're thinking I'm getting specific, but I remember it happened about the same time I had a tree fall on my house, so I'm kind of remembering it. Because of that. I think it was the hurricane that came that was the size of Colorado. I remember that too. Yeah. But something needed to needed to be voted on, at the next meeting. But I was going to say, my question was, if this is what's current, is there a problem with this or something? Is that what your concern is, or
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I think at this point, in my 3+ years here, the executive committee is essentially has the same responsibility as the TAC or the CTAC. It doesn't have additional powers in terms of, it's an advisory committee just like the TAC would be. And as you can see under item B on the screen, most of the possible powers that could be granted by the full board are recommendations, are the ability to recommend different things. And I think that's the role that the executive committee has had for a number of years, aside from the anomalies like you mentioned in 2003. So I think that the question is, if that is the case, for the most part, the executive committee has met to to prep for the full meeting and has not had specific duties or requests from the full body. So I think to the chair's point, the question is it a good use of time for the executive committee to meet every month? Given its current powers, should that change? Does the executive committee want to recommend a change in what its role might be? And I do have some background on other MPOs, Mr. Chair.
Well, that's good. I'm glad. That's what I asked Jeff to. Here, let me give a little bit of genesis since you asked what, is there something wrong? No, there's nothing wrong. When I realized I was going to be chair, my sense of coming to these meetings has been, well, you're just going over the stuff we're going to talk about in the policy board.
Right.
That seemed like a lot of the meeting. So Chet picked up what I said. Is that the best use of time for people some people drive quite a ways to get here at 8:30? And so I just asked the question. I just said, is this something we've looked at? And they said, well, no, it hasn't been. And so maybe, do we meet once a quarter? And then I didn't want to push it a certain direction. I wanted to open it up and say, maybe folks say, you know what, and we'll hear from Mr. Parsons in a second, do other executive committees function differently? So I wanted to put everything on the table, not drive it towards like, hey, let's reduce our meeting time. But if we end up reducing and doing it once a quarter and we can accomplish what we need to, that's what I would urge the committee to think of, just to save everybody an hour. And you're not, we're moving further town. Some people are going to be traveling further. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with this. It's just thought, have we looked at it? And so with that, go ahead, Ms. O'Bannon.
The executive committee general is usually in the past has been the hiring and firing group, or they do the first series of AOK.
Or interview candidates.
Yeah, and interview candidates. They're usually the people that sit on a hire and the committee that does the assessment for the different people, like Mr. Parsons.
That opens up a whole nother discussion. I don't
even really see it in here, but I know that's what we've done in the past. It's left to the executive committee, not to the full board. And when we go to the full board, we say, the executive committee says, you did a good job. And we don't even discuss it. Everybody just nods. So there are some functions, and I'd like to hear what others do. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. That this is the body that's supposed to do the legwork, basically, to do the it's just what you said, sort of like CTAC, they're the technical people, but we catch things before they come to the full board, and the full board meeting should go much quicker for doing that. That's what I've viewed.
Gotcha.
Is we catch problems and dig in a little deeper than the full board. I can agree that you might not need to come every single time. I can see that. But we do have a function. We're supposed to be doing the background and light work more so than the rest of the board. That's what I've always felt.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
According to Ms. O'Bannon's points, if we're doing these things, do they need to be put in our bylaws? The thing about, deferring to the executive committee for hirings and things like that. I don't know, but I would like to say this. I appreciate you bringing this to our attention because I think it is a worthwhile discussion. And I'm, like others, are interested in hearing what other MPOs, do with their executive committee. But I think it's worth having the discussion because we haven't had this discussion. I can't recall in my experience coming down here. So I think you putting it on the agenda today is good.
You want to go? That was one of the things you and I talked about. Like, how do other organizations, if there's any interest
Yes.
in this? So let's dive in.
Okay, I did some research and I was focused solely on MPOs and their practices because I think executive committees at the MPO level are a little different than executive committees at other organizations or agencies.
Good morning.
Oh, Dr. Newell.
Hello, Dr. Newell. Good morning.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had a little difficulty getting in this morning
Well, glad you're here.
on my side. So,
Welcome. Yep.
So I've just got maybe 4 or 5 slides. The first, the Broward MPO in Florida is a larger MPO than ours. It's got a lot, probably double the staff of us. Their executive committee meets prior to the monthly meeting to review the agenda and discuss current and future projects and initiatives. Sounds familiar. The results of these discussions are greater understanding and closer coordination between the full board and the executive director. So very similar to our current setup. Des Moines, Iowa, the executive committee receives technical guidance and recommendations from the technical committee and then offers its recommendations to the policy committee. So they have a structure where the TAC, the technical committee, filters up through the executive committee and then to the full board. So very similar, but slightly different chain of command. El Paso, Texas, the executive committee's roles and responsibilities include a review of the business aspect of the MPO, review of the executive director. This is back to Mrs. Abandon's comments. Review of contracts and other documents and other assignments for recommendations to their full board. Oahu, Hawaii, they'll provide a forum for informal, this is directly from their bylaws, provide a forum for conversation and discussion, consider, evaluate, and vet ideas and strategies before they're put to the full policy board, provide informal guidance to staff between policy board meetings or as needed. Should be a standing subcommittee of the policy board. It's not a decision-making body, but a deliberative one, which may make recommendations to the policy board. Again, very similar to us. Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, Hampton Roads TPO, Fredericksburg Area MPO, Stanton, Augusta, Waynesburg MPO, Roanoke Valley TPO, Charlottesville, Albemarle MPO. None of those have an executive committee. So that's the other side. So most Virginia MPOs,
doesn't.
most Virginia MPOs do not have.
Most, it sounds like all, except for us.
I didn't look at all 19, but
Oh, there are
yeah,
that
there's
many, okay,
21, 25.
okay.
But
The bigger
bigger
ones,
ones,
yeah.
yes. So I think that's a good kind of baseline to help this discussion about, I think it could go anywhere from, do we need an executive committee to, should we meet on a more spread out basis to keep things as they are, all the way up to, should the executive committee have more powers and duties?
I think so. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, so we're reading the definition of the executive committee out of the bylaws, is what we've been handed. Is there, and I should know this, I should read the bylaws, I guess, but is there anything in our bylaws about meetings in general? Is there anything earlier in the bylaws that refers to meetings that we even have to meet, the policy board meet monthly, or anything like that? Is there anything in our bylaws about meetings?
I don't have the full bylaws in front of me, but I think there's a meeting section, but I think it's specific to the full board. There's a separate section on the committees where executive committee, TAC, and CTAC are all listed together.
But it doesn't list the executive committee as, it says that the full board has to meet monthly, is that what it says?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Like I said, let's keep it free flowing. It's kind of a workshop, so yes, sir.
Yes, sir. To answer your question, Ms. Laskewell, there's no specific requirement for the executive committee to meet on any basis.
Another, okay.
So you could set those rules yourselves, and the bylaws would not have to be amended to effectuate that change if you
Okay.
were to make a change. The full board, that's defined in when they should meet, and the rules about meetings and
Okay.
bylaws are specific, but they apply to the full board.
Gotcha.
And
But
the
not the executive. Okay, so no change in bylaws if we wanted to make a change here.
Yeah, you could alter that yourselves.
Yes.
As you know, we often don't meet in January. I don't think there's any specific thing in there that we must meet, but if it does say we must meet, we can vote not to meet. I'm assuming that because we've been doing it.
We missed last month in part because I said,
Well.
let's just not meet and we'll pick it
Often
up.
in
We didn't miss it,
August,
did
we
we?
do that.
Things
No,
didn't
but
fall apart, no.
we pretty much do have to meet some months, wouldn't it? Isn't it April and May, or is it in September, October? There's some months that and I get it mixed up with the, PDC's dates. But we're on a federal schedule, October 1st. And so I know we have to meet certain deadlines and vote. I mean, we must. we can't eliminate some, but we've often not met in January and August. Those seem to be the two that, because August, nothing really needs to happen and everybody's on vacation. In January, new boards meet, and often new people are elected, or, that sort of thing. So I know we have been doing that. I don't know what the bylaws say, but, so we don't necessarily have to meet, but we must meet at certain times. But with this, we just kind of followed what the meetings were.
Right.
So I know what you're saying.
Any other reactions and thoughts, particularly to what Chet shared with what others are doing? Yes, sir.
I've seen MPO from the perspective of staff and never came to these meetings, so I didn't know there was an executive committee till I came back as an elected official. But it does seem that not every meeting every month, but there are situations like before adoption of the budget as recommended by the staff, or when there's a decision about personnel, which we've done before. There is a way to dig more into detail, a smaller group.
Right.
So that when, I think the point was made, when it gets to the full body, there's a comfort level if the executive committee has recommended it because we've discussed it, as opposed to just endorsing what the TAC said. TAC has a role, it's more technical. We look at it from a policy perspective. So I don't know if Ms. LaScalette was headed that way, but I don't see us meeting regularly, but as needed when there's an issue that probably ought to be further discussed without dragging down the full policy board, and give that extra level of review so that when it goes to the full policy board, they feel like this issue's been vetted and we can act. So I think there's a legitimate role for the committee, but maybe not on a monthly basis.
Dr. Newville?
Yes. For me, the executive committee has, and two, I can't see exactly who was speaking last, but there's a value of having the smaller representative body vet and review whatever the matter is coming before us before going to the policy board, and having them have some sense of recommendation consensus. And it has not been, I'm not clear in terms of the concern, it's not been unduly burdensome from my perspective to have an executive committee prior to the full policy board. Again, for reviewing agenda, but even more importantly, reviewing matters and making recommendations or getting consensus to be able to make recommendation back to the full body. So is there a concern about continuing to have, I'm not sure, and I apologize I was having a little challenge getting on this morning, but is there a concern about having an executive committee at all versus a TAC and a full policy board? I'm not sure the concern. I've found value in having the executive committee meet prior to the policy board.
Sure, yeah, Dr. Newville, we, in talking with the chair, we really wanted to have a discussion this morning about the role of the executive committee and the worthiness of, I think, what you just mentioned, having the kind of the review of items before the full policy board takes it up. The recent history of the executive committee is basically just that, in reviewing agenda items before it gets to the full board. There haven't really been other responsibilities or duties asked of the executive committee other than the review and possibly some form of recommendations on a month-to-month basis. So I think the discussion was really centered around is the status quo something that is desirable to everyone? Should the executive committee have additional responsibilities? Does the executive committee need to meet every month to continue doing this? And then based on the research that I did, is it worth having the executive committee at all? based on the other MPOs in Virginia. It sounds, Mr. Chair, if I can, that from staff's perspective, it sounds like there is a usefulness to having the executive committee. I think that it sounds like there's a general consensus that it is nice to review items before it gets to the full board. I think from staff's perspective, we would fully support a reduction in the number of meetings a year, just on the administrative side. But we'll certainly defer that to the.
Yeah, we're trying to figure all that out.
Right.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna agree with Dr. Newbill. As Chet knows, anytime I've been chairman, I always meet with staff, before the meetings that we have, whether it's, the executive committee and then the policy, we go through the agenda. The flexibility exists today for the chairman to go through an agenda with staff and make a determination, we have, haven't we, Chet, about the efficacy of going forward with an executive committee meeting scheduled on our agenda. We've canceled those meetings. I know other chairmen have done the same thing when it wasn't prudent to have the executive committee meet. So the flexibility exists today. And if the issue is whether or not we should be reducing meetings, again, that option exists today based on what's before the body. That's my comments.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Well, as in running any organization, the executive committee is your on-call committee who knows what's going on, is well-informed, and is supposed to be ready to meet. If something happened, an emergency, such as I mentioned before, you just have the executive committee meet, and if there's a representative from each jurisdiction, and they have agreed, as Mr. Williams said, to be on call, I'll call it that, if needed. And we have that flexibility now. If something happened and we didn't have any executive committee, you would have to form one very quickly. That probably could cause some problems and maybe a time lag. And again, if there was a hurricane, I'll just throw that one out again. And we knew that it was going to be happening, but we had to vote on something. If everybody, you could pull together the executive committee, and everybody on the full committee or board would know that they are their representative. That's what it comes in handy for,
Sure.
an executive committee. So I would not do away with my executive committee of an organization.
Yeah, I strongly support paring down the numbers of the executive committee meetings. I'd like it to be set, and I know we can always decide, even if we say we're not meeting in January, for example, but there's a need that arises to meet in January, we can always do that, right? We can always add it back in. It would be nice to have a schedule set so we know in advance what our schedule is gonna look like.
Right.
Rather than we'll just call you and let you know or whatever, do it audible or whatever. So I would really like to cut the meetings down, maybe half, every other month or something like that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, we already know, as Ms. O'Bannon pointed out, historically, 2 months that we don't meet. I mean, it's just a fact. If you go back and look at, what we've done in the past. You can go ahead and put that in a schedule someplace, and if you need to, you can go ahead and call the meeting. None of us know as we go through the fiscal year, what's going to come before us. We've got an idea, about certain things, but we have to, need to address issues as they come to the body.
We can do that.
So I don't see how we could say, okay, we're gonna meet 6 times a year instead of, 10, whatever we're doing now. I don't know how you do that. That's my comment.
Hello?
Yes, Dr. Newbill, yes.
Yes, I agree with the last comment. For me, it is an opportunity, I think, to really have in place an entity that, and someone else mentioned it earlier, that if there is an unforeseen event and we need to respond quickly on behalf, that we can convene this smaller entity. So for me, having it have a standing meeting time and only, it could be canceled, but it's just, I would like to see it continue to be on the agenda and only canceled as if it is the chair and the CEO who determine that there is not something that needs vetting or recommendation to the full body for this upcoming session, it can come off. It just seems to not be as beneficial and functional to say, and a little arbitrary to say, well, we're going to meet 6 times. So I'd like to keep it on, and we can have the opportunity to remove it if that's determined prior. We have enough time prior to the extent possible, prior to the full meeting to determine if we need to have an executive session. But I would prefer to leave it on as we have, and only as we've canceled meetings overall, for both the full body and period.
Thank you, Dr. Newell. So, and I'll start calling people's names so that Dr. Newell knows who's speaking. Ms. Lascolette.
The only other thing I would add to that is those of us who have to travel a long distance, this early morning, we're running into school zones and school buses and all that. And when it takes more than an hour and a half to get to these meetings, just know that it's really worth the time to get here for an 8:30 meeting for what we actually do accomplish.
Well, what I'm hearing, and again, I'm doing this not to drive it a certain way. I really wanted, this has been good and helpful. So I'm hearing, notwithstanding we're one of the larger ones that has an executive committee and the others don't, that we want to keep it. And we don't want to necessarily call an audible. And I think, because if the executive committee's function is going to be to make recommendations to the policy board, then like Mr. Williams said, we can't put it on a calendar every other month or every 3 months, knowing that we've landed on the month there's going to be a lot of action items where the input from the executive committee is going to be more meaningful. So I'm inclined to leave it as is. My reaction to like Broward County, for instance, in your list, I would think a larger MPO is going to have a more active executive committee just by definition, because smaller groups are going to be more functional. This is just, again, my limited experience from many others in the room, relatively my limited experience relative to y'all's experiences. Transportation has become a different topic since CBTA, and I'm seeing a much more of an engagement just in the short time I've been here. So I'm a little wary myself of putting a lot of weight on an executive committee recommendation, because maybe it's because I'm still early in the learning curve too. But when I come to a policy board meeting, before I cast my vote, a TAC recommendation and even executive committee recommendation is not going to keep me from wanting to understand exactly and doing a deeper dive. And that's because I think, in part, transportation is done much more dynamic now than it was before CBTA. And I think when I ran for office years ago, I didn't think I'd be up to my eyeballs in transportation issues. And it was just like for us out in Goochland, it was like VDOT does that. Now we talk to them, periodically, but we don't get too involved in it. And now we're trying to figure out how we're going to, we want to engage regionally, of course, but how are we going to use our local money? So we're on a learning curve. So I don't see us turning this into a Broward County type executive committee that is going to have the policy board meetings sail a little faster. But I do think, from what I'm hearing, I would like, when we have any, and maybe we'll just look at the number of action items. And if there are no action items on the policy board, maybe I'll say, let's not have the executive committee meeting if there's nothing for us to dig into and recommend. But if there's action items, I think let's have the executive committee meeting and we'll dig into it. And then I think at the policy board meeting, we should mention, how the TAC voted and how the executive committee voted, and move us maybe in that direction. Because I think as we get our feet under us with CBTA, maybe we can move towards that. and certainly as I think, as the years pass, I'll get more comfortable as myself and my fellow board members get more comfortable with transportation, then I could see, so-and-so's on the executive committee. I know they have a handle on it. I don't need to do a deep dive. And, I think that's my more than 2 cents on it. So is that, now, yes, ma'am,
Chair.
thank you.
What I would like to see is, we have the executive committee and their responsibilities, but they also had a technical advisory committee. And so I would like to see what their duties and responsibilities are as well.
With the tax?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Page. All right, we'll come to that. To make sure we have enough time for Chet to do the policy board review, I do want to ask you all, as specific as we can be, are you all interested in having the executive committee take on the planning role for our transportation forum? That was one suggestion that was in the email there. And again, I think a robust executive committee is probably great for Chet and his staff. Because again, it's a smaller unit that he can, it's easier to get some direction, a little less wieldy. Less unwieldy. So,
What are the other?
yeah, one or the other. Is there an interest in the executive committee taking on really an active, specific role in planning our annual transportation forums? Mr. Hodges?
I'm hearing you say that the staff could use us to bounce, they would prepare or get some general direction from us and then come back and so that when it reaches the policy board, it's been discussed and we're more a sounding board and potentially recommending it, but I see your point about providing value to the staff rather than having to guess and present it and having a discussion at the full policy board.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleague.
And let me just clarify, you're talking about, not about the planning the transportation.
Oh, I am talking about that.
You are talking about that?
Yeah, they would
Okay.
prepare, or we have a general topic, somebody's got to come up with a program, they present it to a smaller group, and then before they present to the full.
Hold on just a second, David, but I think when you said prepare all this and hand it to the policy board, I'm not talking, something like a planning for the transportation, I'm talking about just eliminate that to the
And never take
executive
it to
committee.
the policy board. Or just
The whole
present.
point is to get the planning done and in place. I don't think the policy board needs to, because if we do all this planning and then we go to the policy board, I don't like that. We don't,
I get your point,
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, I agree.
David had a question, I think, or David had a comment.
No, I'm fine with whatever role for the executive committee as long as Dr. Newbill is still on the executive committee.
I
Ms.
think I
O'Bannon?
heard that.
Ms. O'Bannon?
The transportation forum is not written in stone. It was just something that we decided we would do 1 year
Right,
because there were so many things happening all at the same time and we didn't have time in any particular meeting. And it's the same issue that years ago, I know this is history, but we didn't have as many speakers. And things were happening very quickly and the people on the board wanted to control things, so there were very few speakers. So we pushed hard to get some of the speakers to give you background information on why this was happening or what was going on. And then when there were some major changes at the federal level on transportation issues, 1 year we decided we would do a forum because we could bring in other people that couldn't be here or that didn't want to come to a smaller meeting. We could make it a somewhat bigger deal, and we got good speakers. Okay, you don't have to have a transportation. I just want to point that out. It was something that was started just a few years ago. I mean, like 5, maybe? It's more than that?
It goes back to 2013.
13, okay,
well, I don't want to
but
be.
we don't have to. I'm
Yeah,
just saying
I don't want
that
to be
if
the
there
one to
is
stop
not,
it. I've
if
enjoyed
there's no
it.
topic or there's nothing going on, you don't have to do it.
Well, there's going to be something going on, and I don't want to be the one to stop it. I think, and I've enjoyed them. Real quickly, so we allow enough time. Dr. Newbill?
Yes, I'd like to see the executive committee assume that role and responsibility, working with staff. I think it is important to continue to have this kind of conversation annually, broadly across the region, because so much changes all the time. So I'd like to see us continue it and to have, again, executive committee work with the leadership, with Chet and staff to plan it.
Thank you. I think that's more efficient. Yes, Ms. Last,
No, and I was just trying to say the.
I think we might have somebody that'll help us implement, which is, I'm always looking for that. Anybody can help us move this forward.
Well, as you all mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, members of the executive committee, the executive committee can be empowered by the policy board to do any manner of things. The list of specific items is not a limited list. So if the desire of the executive committee is to take on the role of the Transportation Forum Planning Committee, as it were, then I would suggest that you recommend that to the policy board that the policy board votes to delegate that authority or to entrust that authority to the executive committee to tell you to do that. And then you'll, under your bylaws, then you'll have that authority and then you can go forward and do that.
And is there any reason that I should not bring it up at today's policy board meeting, or can I just?
There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't. You could, absolutely.
I'll add it in there then. It's an action item, right?
If you want it to be, it can be. There's no reason why it couldn't be. It's just a matter of delegation from the full board, and you could make that recommendation at the request of your fellow executive committee members during your chairman's comments.
And Ms. O'Bannon, I'm not gonna try to make it a permanent. I'll just say for this year,
No, that's fine.
this year, so that I keep the flexibility. I mean, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how we do
Well,
as an
what
executive
traditionally
committee.
why it came up was that the person who was chairman had an issue, they wanted to make sure everybody understood. That was the first couple of times. So the person who was in charge in the past was the chairman of the committee, and that was pretty much it. And when I was chairman, I had the different departments in Henrico do presentations. So, but you can do it any way you want.
Well, no, it's not, but if the policy board turns us loose to be the planning group for this next summer's transportation meeting, I will be leaning on y'all. Y'all will be hearing from me, and your participation is going to be required to help with this planning. So if the policy board directs us, and Chet, you'll lean on this committee as well, and we'll do some. I think that'll hopefully be a little more nimble and can help you. So let's dive in. Let's dive into what we have. We got,
Mr. Chairman,
10 minutes.
I didn't want to extend it, but just, the conclusion is we'll continue to have the executive, other than the 2 regular times a year we don't meet, have the executive committee plan, and the chairman will decide whether we meet or not.
I'm planning on leaving things just as they are, 8:30 policy board. Like I said, if there's, very few items, if there's nothing on the agenda, action item, I'll probably cancel it. Just say next month we're not meeting, and I'll try to get that out as soon as possible, but that's just gonna be, give and take, because I don't think we always know what action items are coming until, so we'll have to be flexible. But for now, I say leave it on your calendar, and then just look at it as a free hour if we're able to free it up. Thank you all again for helping on that discussion, guiding us, and I look forward to our planning on the transportation forum. Anything you want to highlight for us? Anything on the policy board meeting today that you want to bring to our attention now?
Yes, sir. I've got the agenda on the screen. Dr. Neville, if you can see that. The chair's report, there's a highlight this month for Chesterfield County, so looking forward to that. The secretary's report, we've got our work status and financial report for August for review. There's also a CTAC report that was included in the agenda. Under new business, Mr. Gregory is going to lead a discussion about the FOIA Council guidance and compliance for electronic meetings. If you do recall and are on the CBTA, this was it's going to be a very similar, if not identical, discussion to the last CBTA meeting. So just to make sure all of our boards are on the same page. There is a action requested under item B2 from GRTC to amend the FY 21 to 24 Transportation Improvement Program. And Mr. Bushing will provide the details of that request so that the board is educated and able to make the proper recommendation or the proper decision. Just so happens, under item B3, there is a transportation forum planning item. Right now, it's labeled just as discussion, but it seems the discussion this morning is that might be an action item instead. So I think that would be a proper place to discuss the role of the executive committee on helping to plan for that. And I think from staff's perspective, we have spent the last year, I think, as an organization, talking about the importance of a transportation forum and kind of an expanded role, especially given the presence of the CBTA and how the CBTA and the TPO work together. So I think this is a great timing and looking forward to the guidance from the executive committee.
Good, so on that item, to pare down the time that the policy board spends, since we're moving in that direction, you're not gonna do any kind of dive into topics and things like that. We'll just use this time to introduce what we just talked about. And can I just maybe do it like by a voice vote and see if there's any
Yes, sir.
any objections to it, and just if we get the consensus by voice vote at that point,
If you get the vote to approve it, you're good to go.
that just approve, I'll say, there's no reason I can't make a motion, right? I'll just make a motion and I'll try to sail through that part. And then at our future executive committee meetings, we'll do the deep dive into ideas, topics, discussions, potential things.
Mr. Chairman, it's not typical for the chairman to make a motion, but you could certainly, I would
It's not
suggest
against
that
the
you
law, is it?
invite a motion
Okay,
from
well,
a member of the executive committee.
if somebody here speaks up quickly,
You're not supposed to do it.
So moved.
Well, we'll count, Dr. Newman, I'll look there. Thank you. So that's the point we will, and maybe we can cut that from 10 minutes to just 2 or 3. Sure. All right.
And then
Scenario
the
planning.
last item under B4 is, I'm just gonna provide a brief update on the status of our scenario planning project. Refresh the memory of the board about what that is and what our timeline is to get that kicked off and started. I do have some new information on that, so.
Good, I think there's gonna be some interest in that, but you might get some questions on that.
And then we'll move into agency and committee reports. And I guess I will kick that off with a CBTA update and then move into our other partner agencies. And then other business, and we'll get out of here.
Future meeting topics, can you jump to that point in the agenda? I think that was, oh, good, you got some dates in there since I last.
Some of them, yes.
We're starting to fill some dates.
Yes.
Okay. That's I think that goes to our earlier discussion where we were talking about, we don't know what, David, when you said we don't know what's coming up, I've asked Chet let's try to tighten that up as much as we can, so and that way we send a signal out to these folks, hey, we're counting on you being here in January or February or whatever to speak to the group.
Well, didn't we just say we weren't gonna meet?
We don't meet in January.
I'm just throwing that out there. It says we're gonna speak January 5th, and I'm interested.
Well, we'll move it if we don't meet. I honestly didn't remember off the top of my head when we don't meet. I think that meeting might be a little tricky in terms of, that's gonna be our new location
Well, that's part
anyway.
of this
We'll be,
issue.
so if we don't,
We're planning on being there. And I do believe we did meet last January, so we'll certainly adjust as needed.
this isn't written in stone, but now you think we'll be able to get in, I mean, because we'll be one of the first meetings.
That's the plan, yes, sir.
You heard it here. And it's being recorded. That's great. I mean, I know they're ahead of schedule. We'll talk about that at the policy board meeting, that they're ahead of schedule in finishing, but the lease starts January 1, right?
No, it's early.
Early, okay.
Is there a November meeting here?
There is not.
There's not.
The lease ends the end of this
Well,
month.
that's what I thought, but I didn't
That's right.
know we're gonna meet someplace else.
We're gonna meet someplace else, still to be determined
All right.
for November.
Thought I did.
That's gonna come up at the policy board. We're gonna talk about that. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Lasswell.
Can I ask a question about an item on the agenda?
Absolutely.
Item B3, wait a minute, here we go. B1B, remote participation of members. So if we approve this plan, we approve this policy today, it goes into effect today?
I believe that we're planning on this being the first reading for this
Okay,
policy
okay, good.
document. It wouldn't
My-
entail an amendment to the bylaws, so technically you don't have to follow that process, but I think we're going to just to.
Do it.
And in fact, today is just listed as a discussion item.
Right, okay.
So, we're not requesting, staff isn't recommending any action today, it's more of just a discussion
Right,
item.
and so my question really is the reasons why someone can request to be, participate remotely. The item, more than 60 miles, if you live more than 60 miles from the meeting location. Where did that 60 miles come from?
That's in the statute,
Oh, that's in the code, Virginia code?
yes it is.
That's a shame.
She was-
That's a shame.
Now, the next question, is that as the crow flies? or-
Well, this is, it just makes it even further and longer to go to new locations, so.
Federal law. That would be, I guess, what the federal statute says that we established here. I'm sure it's to try to keep it more local. Just put
Well,
it
an hour and a
on.
half is not exactly local.
I know, but just
Yeah, thank you.
obviously why they choose.
All right, anything else, any questions before we take a few minutes? Right, yes, sir.
I
Mr.
know we're
Hopkins?
running out of time, but
No, you-
fine. I thought I saw an email that said, we have the August report, the work plan report, and there was a discussion of, or thought of adopting an annual plan to submit. I didn't see the annual plan on the agenda.
Yes, sir, we're looking at that for next month, I believe.
Got it, thank you.
We had talked about that, but it was too quick. We didn't want to surprise the board with an item that wasn't vetted yet.
Thank you.
Thank you all again. All right, we'll reconvene with the rest of,
Take 3.
thanks again, everybody.
Does the city of Richmond still have their order in place that they're?
We decide.
Dr. Newton